welcome Salty Peeps to a special Floatation Tank Association panel discussion presented on August 3rd, 2021. My name is Jonathan Roug, your host for the evening and member of the FTA's Outreach and Education Committee. The topic of today's discussion is, how does your float center run without you? Many of you know very well how difficult it may be to take time away from your small business, from taking that much needed vacation, like we just spoke to Nicole about, or spending time with friends or relatives. And of course, most importantly, I would say the upcoming Float Conference 2021, just a few short weeks away. You may be asking yourself, how can I confidently step away knowing everything will be okay? And that's what we aim to discuss for today's conversation. How does your float center run without you? Now, before we get started, I just want to welcome all those who are joining us on Zoom. If you do happen to catch the live stream or this Zoom call, post any questions that you might have in the questions box or the chat. And as soon as all the participants are done presenting, we'll get a chance to answer any of those. For today's panel, I would like to introduce three members of the Float Conference Board of Directors: Nicole Walcott, James Harder, and Director Kim Hannan. Nicole, James, and Kim will be sharing their expert strategies for putting your float center in autopilot and talk a bit about Float Conference 2021, I hope. I'm sure they will. We are also joined by three members of the Board of Directors for the Floatation Tank Association: James Harder, Drew Kane, and Greg Griffin. And again, they're here to share some unique insight on their centers and what strategies and procedures they implement in their absence. With introductions out of the way, I would like to open up this discussion to the panelists. Nicole is a former U.S. Army veteran inspired by floating after she sustained an injury that caused crippling pain, then opened a float center called, is it Shantae? I apologize if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Wellness. Nicole is a member of the Board of Directors for the Float Conference and just so happens to also be nominated for the Board of Directors for the FTA, which you can vote now if you're a member of the FTA. Okay, go ahead, Nicole.
Hi. So I thought that this would be particularly applicable because I am currently on vacation. The summer, as most people know, is typically a slower season, especially down south. I am located in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about that I did not implement when I first opened, but I did in year 2, which has been a total game changer for me, was making sure that I have all of my processes and everything that we do documented down. So we typically tend to operate like McDonald's. Let me explain. So anything that we have a giant operations manual. We've actually spent the last year and a half converting it into something that's more online. We use Trello and it's more user-friendly. And so what we do is anything that a staff member would need to know, or anybody that is walking into this, running the center would need to know, goes into our operations manual. If it is something that's like a multi-step process, like for instance, the deep clean, it gets documented and it becomes a workflow. So therefore, we can take our operations manual and we can hand it to anyone. And as long as they can read, they're able to use the pictures that we've put in there. They're able to use anything that we've put in there so that they could essentially, albeit it wouldn't be perfect, but they could run the center in the absence of any staff member there. And so we really there was a great book that I read. It was called The E-Myth Revisited. And it talks a lot about treating your business like a franchise, even if you're not going to franchise. But so everything's written down, everything's documented. And so then that way we know that in my absence or my manager's absence or a staff member that's been there for a while, anyone can run the center. And so in any time, and we encourage our staff members too, that anytime they have something that comes up that's not in the manual, to add to the manual. So it's like a living, breathing document that everybody has access to and that everybody can view. We also use an application online called Loom, which allows you to record videos. And so we will record lots of videos, even screenshotting and screen sharing videos, so that people can actually watch and see, like, okay, so if she's saying that this needs to be clean, like the pump room, my definition of clean may be different than my staff member's definition of clean because of, you know, the way we were raised or whatever. But so they see a picture of what the pump room looks like to our standards. So they know that if it doesn't look like that when they clean it, they need to fix it and make sure it's clean. But that has been like my one big takeaway, is to be able to have this giant operations manual, and to be able to have people run it in my absence. So when I opened my center back in 2017, I opened it with the intention of never having to physically be there to run it, so that the center is never dependent on me being there to run it. The center can always be run by staff. And that was just kind of one of our little things that I thought was cool.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for presenting. Up next, we're actually going to have Greg. Jocelyn is the conference director. Oh, I'm sorry. I misquoted one of my introductions. Kim Hannan is the president of the board of directors, not the conference director. My apologies. So next up, we're going to have Greg Griffin. And Greg is an industry expert both in life and business. I wrote this, Greg, so I hope it's okay. His wellness journey started in 2007, having discovered floating shortly after 2011. He knew from that point forward that he would bring floating to Madison. During that time, he played a very active role in the Float Collective, aiding and contributing to discussions. Greg is the owner of Float Madison and a member of the board of directors for the FTA. Greg, take it away.
Thanks, John. Thanks for putting this together. And yeah, so I am going to talk about something kind of maybe on the opposite spectrum of what Nicole just talked about, and that is what I do at my center when I am leaving for a few days. And so things are different for me because I am the sole owner operator here. So yes, I envy Nicole and those of you that have staff. It's something I cannot wait to do. Planned on doing it last year and then COVID hit. So next year is the year that I take that on. So I'm excited and nervous at the same time. But what I've done for the last few years when I am taking days off is I shut my center down. And wasn't easy to do at first. I think the first time I did it was the year I opened, and it was for the first float conference I attended while being open. So it's 2016. I think I was open for maybe 6 months, maybe a little less, something like that, about 6 months. And shutting down after first opening the business for an entire week was scary. But I had already been to 2 other float conferences. I knew the value of the float conference, so I knew it'd be totally worth the lost revenue and expenses of it. So I shut my center down for that. And then there's a couple other times during the year where I make it a goal to shut down for a little bit to take vacation time. Yeah, I do look forward to having staff. So when I do shut down, they can keep things running, keep people floating here that want to float while I'm gone. But that's just the way I do things right now. So I'm kind of just going to go through a checklist here just so I don't miss anything. And there's all these little tasks that I do when I shut my center down, and they kind of vary if I'm shutting down for just like a day or 2 or 3, as opposed to shutting down for longer, say 5 to 7 days. I think the most amount of time I ever had my center shut down for was 7, maybe 8 days. And that is when I go to the float conference or when I take a vacation, which I haven't done yet this year. I did a staycation for 5 days just 2 weeks ago. It was amazing. But I do make it a goal to take a good vacation every year as well. So I'm not going to screen share anything. I'm just going to kind of go through these bullet points of the things that I do at my center when I shut down. So it kind of goes into two categories. The first is what to do with the float tanks and the float suites that the float tanks are in. The second part of that is taking care of the rest of the space. And that includes how I communicate to our guests that we will not be here to run floats while I'm away. So taking care of float tanks, I'd say everything's pretty easy to be honest, but the float tank part's very easy. Some things I do right away are, I want to make sure the rooms are clean for one, so that when I get back, it's not a lot of work to get the tanks up and running again. And so, I do all my the things that you would do on like a deep clean day. So for me, that's changing filters for one. So going in there, changing the filters so that you don't have to do that right when you get back. Two is I set up the auto filtration cycle on the float tanks. And I think most float tanks have that option now where you can put it on like, vacation mode or sleep mode or overnight mode, whatever it is, so that your float tanks will continue to run the filtration system every so often. Sometimes it's once a day, some tanks it's, to keep up temperature. But making sure that you're running filtration every so often. I actually do have one float tank that doesn't have an auto filtration cycle on it. It's a float tank that has the option now, but I just haven't upgraded to it yet. So when I'm gone for 2 to 3 days, I just run the filtration before I leave. And then for up to 3 days, it's not going to run the filtration cycle. For those longer trips, like the float conference coming up, I'll be gone for 5 or 6 days. I will have a friend come in here every second to third day to run that filtration cycle for me. And that part of it kind of goes into my second part of this, which is taking care of the rest of the space. I'll have that same person that comes in and run that filtration cycle, water my plants here as well. I have a lot of plants here. Some will be okay for 7 days, like the succulents, but many need to be watered every 3 or 4 days top. So making sure my plants are watered so I don't come back to a bunch of dead plants. It's not fun. Never happened. I don't want to imagine it. Third part of that, or fourth part, is filling the tanks to a little bit above that fill line. So most float tanks will have that fill line. If your float tank doesn't have that fill line, I'm sure you have an idea from the manufacturer where that water level should be. And so I like to fill mine just a little bit above that to take into account for evaporation. You might be okay to not fill it above there, especially if you're using a pool cover that some of us use in our certain float tanks to minimize condensation while your tank is shut down. So I have one float tank, for example, where it comes with this like pool cover with all the little bubbles in it. And I can throw that on that float tank, shut the door to the float tank, and it's probably only going to lose maybe 1/10 of an inch in a week. So I really don't worry about that one. My other float tanks, I don't have a cover for them yet. So what I do for those is I crack the lid maybe 1/4 of an inch, so that way condensation doesn't build up inside. But having it crack that little bit as well will create, will make it so that condensation happens while I'm gone. So for those tanks, I definitely want to fill it up just a little bit past the fill line, not a lot, maybe an 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, just a little bit above there. My next point is pool covers on the tank. I already touched on that. And again, not all float tanks have those pool covers, but it's something I recommend looking into. I kind of do want to get them for my other tanks, just they're nice to have. And keeping your float tank temperatures at a certain setting, I've seen some people that like to turn that down a bit. Personally, I just keep mine at their normal 93.5, 94.5 degree setting. I just have never seen any reason why to lower that. Some people say maybe it saves on electricity. if someone has a question about that or has a different idea, I'd love to hear it. But for me, I don't find any reason to change that at all. Beyond that, another thing I like to do is shock the tanks with hydrogen peroxide, or if you use bromine or chlorine, I'd recommend using some kind of shock product beforehand. But again, this is maybe an optional thing. It's just something I like to do before I head out. So with peroxide, when I shock it, I'm usually doing about 200. I bring it to about 200 parts per million. Some people like to go a little higher than that. That's where I feel comfortable, just because some of that peroxide will be burned up by the time you get back or used up. And so I like to come back to a float tank that is still in the range of around 80 to 100 parts per million. So I think that takes care of what I do with the float tanks and float suites. Again, it's pretty easy stuff to do. So taking care of the rest of the space, first thing again is making sure my plants here are watered. Some people might want to clean the space before they leave, like mopping, sweeping, dusting. That way, when you come back, you're coming back to a clean space. It feels good. It's something I need to get better at, because sometimes I'll get back from these long trips and I come in maybe 10, 20 minutes earlier than usual and thinking, oh, I'll get those little things done in that 10 to 20 minutes. And then it takes me like a half an hour because I didn't mop before I leave. And I'm like, oh, there's some salt in the hallways I should have cleaned up. So of course, with watering plants, that's when I have a friend come into the space here. And so, I give them a key, have a trusting friend that'll come in twice while I'm gone. And I trust that they're going to water the plants well when they need it. So, finding a friend that's got a decent green thumb, or just knows how to tell a plant that looks thirsty from one that is already watered and fine. And of course, training them on how to run the filtration cycle, which for me, it's easy. I write down the directions, but I also show them before I leave. Hey, just hit this button. It'll say a 30-minute filtration cycle. Good to go. That's it. I turn all of my air temperatures down in my space a little bit more than usual. So overnight, I want to say my space gets down to about 70 to 75 degrees. And then while I'm running floats, we bring that temp up to about 85 degrees. This varies from center to center, depending on your setup, give or take a couple degrees, but I like to keep it down a little bit, but not too low. So again, this kind of varies for different people, but it's just something to keep in mind for your center if you're shutting it down for a while, is to, check your thermostats and put it in a setting that you feel comfortable with. The next few things all kind of go into the same category, where it's letting guests know that we aren't going to be here to run floats. I make a point both at my house and my business to not be telling everyone, or really anyone, that I'm going to be gone. We do have security systems in place at my float center and at my house, with security cameras that I can watch remotely if I wanted to. But, just to minimize the chances of someone thinking, oh, well, now is a good time to go steal a float tank. I'm not sure what they would even try to steal here, but just to, prevent break-ins and stuff like that. So I put a sign on my door that says when we're going to be closed. And part of that sign says they can buy gift certificates online, they can reschedule appointments online. It also mentions that someone will be watching the shop to run filtration cycles, but they can't facilitate floats. So that kind of gives people the idea that, okay, someone's going to be there at sometimes running filtration, but they can't run floats. So it tells them that, don't break into this place. There's someone that's going to be there. I do the same thing with my voicemail. I update my voicemail before I head out, letting people know when we're going to be closed, when we're going to reopen. And same thing, mentioning that they can reschedule appointments online, that they can send an email to us that we might check periodically, and that they can leave a voicemail that we probably won't get back to until we get back from being closed. And the way I word these things are, I just say we're going to be closed for these days. I don't say we're going on vacation. I don't say we're going to a float conference. I just say we're going to be closed for these days. The next thing is, we use Float Helm, but maybe every booking schedule software has this option to where you can put into your scheduling software, when people go to book appointments, if they look at a day, or when they just go to your website and see that software, it says we are closed for these days, so then they can skip ahead to a day you're open again. Let's see, next thing would be hours. So this is pretty much the last thing, but updating hours, this is something that even in this day, a lot of businesses don't do. I'll leave stories out of it, but I'm sure we've all been there where we go to a business and their website says they're open, or Google says they're open, or Yelp, whatever you use says they're open, and you get there and no one's there. So I want to make sure that I update my hours on Google, on Bing, I do Yelp, and maybe Facebook. I forget. I think it's Google, Bing, and Yelp where you can easily update your hours and add special hours. So I always do that before I head out, just adding those special hours in there. And if you don't know how to do that, just Google how to add special hours to any of those platforms. And then that way, if people look up your business on Google, they can see you are closed on those special days. The last little thing is putting a note on your website, maybe that you'll be closed. It's something I've never done, but it's just something you might want to think about as well. Just on the front page of your website, maybe at the top on a little bar that says you'll be closed on these particular days. So that is pretty much what I do. It might sound extensive, but it's just, I highly recommend writing these things down too, having a checklist, to-do list before you head out. And then that way, before you go on vacation, you just check each of these things off to make it super simple and so that you don't forget anything. Beyond that, if anyone has questions about me or anyone that closes their center down when they're gone because we don't have staff, let me know. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Greg. I have to say, I just have this vision in my mind of Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone putting up those little things in the windows, like those mannequins, just to make sure that the float center's safe. Very extensive and awesome information. Thank you, my friend. So up next, we have Drew Kane. Drew is super awesome. He's the owner of I'm assuming is it New Hampshire Float, but NH Float in Londonderry. Is that how I pronounce it? I hope so.
It is Londonderry, yeah.
And I found you online. You're in the business of helping people. Held a lot of different things in life, but you're also a member of the board of directors for the FTA, and of course, a host for the Art of Float podcast. So take it away, Drew.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So I think I'm a good person who's kind of in between Nicole and Greg. I also, I opened in 2017. I have been solo since end of July 2018. I had a business partner to start, been by myself after that. We went our separate ways. I went to the 2 float conferences where I was an owner operator. For those, I shut down. I did not open. I didn't have staff. I just shut down and, kind of ate the loss. 2 float conferences, 2018 and 2019, one in Portland, one in Denver, when I was a sole operator and I just shut down my business. I was closed, didn't open. And for me and my anxiety, that was the best thing for me to do. It was not to try to have my part-time staff run the business. I just didn't feel comfortable with anybody there. I'm a little different from Nicole in that I have stuff written down, but I am not a believer in expecting people to read what I write down. And I actually am the opposite and kind of negative in that I have folders and my staff will ask me questions and I'll point at the folder and say, "Did you look?" And they don't, right? So I don't trust that people are going to look at what they should look at. I think it's there as an emergency or something, but I just haven't found people who are going to that folder and reading stuff. So for me, I feel more comfortable to have a little bit more time to run through this stuff before I leave them alone. When I start off having staff, I leave the business, but I'm actually staying in the area just in case there's an issue. And I've kind of worked my way up with my staff to the point where I'm just starting now to not have, a day where I'm actually going in and checking on staff. I'm still not necessarily going away for the weekend, but I'm not going to the shop and being a helicopter boss. I'm currently at a point where I feel comfortable leaving them for the weekend, but I'm around in case there's a problem. In the back of my head, I'm prepared that if I gotta go in, I'm going in. With that said, that's my comfort level. I'm not, if I had any discomfort whatsoever with my staff, I would just shut down personally if I don't feel they're going to give the type of service that I give. And I'm kind of like Greg in that I ran my business for, I'm just getting staff, 3.5 years, where I'm just getting staff. I felt like, and I still personally feel like I give a better hosted float than any of my staff, right? I can't be there forever. I don't want to be there forever. I want staff to give great floats. Now, it's not that they're giving bad floats, but I've got 3.5 years experience in this and they have a few months. So a bunch of things that I do go over with them on a regular basis, but are things that concern me include, where's the fire extinguisher? I know I just kind of jumped into this right here, but safety, fire extinguisher. So I know I just kind of jumped into that, but what I am most concerned about when I leave is safety of everybody involved, to include my staff and even more so, well, just everybody. So I make sure they know where the fire extinguisher is. I make sure they know what to do in case of an emergency. I'm feeling very confident, and I kind of role play this. And now that I'm talking about it, tomorrow when I'll see a couple of staff, I'm going to ask them, what do you do if someone screams help? What do you do if, and we'll kind of role play those situations. I don't want my staff to be afraid to call 911. I don't want my staff to be afraid to take action. I don't want my staff to, I want them to feel confident. I want them to know if something goes wrong, don't be scared of how Drew will react. I want them to know I have their back. We'll figure it out. But for me, my concern is safety. Everything else we can kind of figure out, right? We can work through it. But I would, again, I go back to the fact that I would not be leaving my staff had I not had a couple of dry runs before leaving out of state. And for me personally, I have high anxiety when I'm not at the float center. It's new to me to have staff, and I'm working through this, but I've been planning this for the last couple of months. So we run through that. I'm starting to leave my staff. I'm feeling confident. This past weekend had 2 days where I didn't go into my float center and we were open the entire time. There were a few issues. We worked through them, but I think we'll be in a good spot in another 4 weeks where there's that much more experience to be had. And the ultimate thing that I try to stress with everyone, keep everyone safe and lead with kindness and lead by example. Don't stress out. Don't freak out. Like, we'll work it out. That's the biggest thing. I do worry about not being there and things going wrong, but I try to prepare for those. Maybe it's just being in the Northeast, but we definitely have a bit of a negative type of vibe to us, I think. So I'm always thinking, what could go wrong and how do we deal with it? What could go wrong? How do we deal with it? So I try to empower my employees to take action and to deal with situations in a confident manner and to know, hey, we'll work it out. We'll figure it out. And again, I want to stress, if I was at all nervous about leaving my staff, I would not do it. I would just close down. To me, it's easier. It's not worth the stress of being, half a country away and worrying if everything's going to go wrong. No, I did that. The first float conference, I had a part-time employee. There was some things that went wrong. It kind of bummed me out during my first experience because I was so stressed out about what was going on. Now I definitely feel confident that it will work out, and I trust my staff a lot more than I did before. But again, I want to see it. I don't want to just leave a stranger, someone new. I don't want them to have to refer to a handbook. I want them to have the experience and to know how do I host a good float, and what do I do if there are any problems that come up. And if I'm going away for 3 days, it's a very short time. People understand, hey, we're not, if the employee has a problem, I try to empower my staff. I've already done these things prior to leaving, and I'm not just cold leaving my staff. I've run through this a few times. I would be stressed out and full of anxiety if my first weekend leaving staff was to go to the float conference. So for me, it would be better if that was the case. I just shut down because they're not ready. Otherwise, I'm working with them towards that ability to leave them and know anything goes wrong, they're going to be able to handle it. They're going to feel confident in handling it. They're going to take action if action is needed. And worst case scenario, they say, hey, Drew's going to be back on Tuesday. Just hang tight. We'll figure this out. And that's part of customer service. If something goes wrong, hey, we'll take care of this. Don't worry. Drew's just away. I know he'll take care of you. No problem. He always does. Hang tight. We'll get back to you. And so it's preparing your staff for those situations, right? Because if everything goes good, you don't have to prepare them for everything going good. Like everyone's smiling and happy, great. But it's those situations where things go wrong. And that's where I think you make and break your business in how you react and handle those situations where it's maybe not perfect or there's any issues that come up. So I'm big on communication. I like with my staff to communicate that, hey, Drew's not around. This is what we'll do. How's this sound? I'll reach out to him. Give us a couple of days. He'll get back to you. Don't really have any issues when we do it like that. So I do write stuff down. I do have it written down, but I always laugh when people ask me questions and I'm like, well, it's written down. Did you look? No. Oh, there's the binder right within reach, right? So I'm a person, I want to see it. I don't want to just know that you have a reference. I want to see you come in. I want to see you do it. I want to leave for the day. I want to go get lunch and maybe go do a couple things, and then I'll come back and I want to know everything went well. So that's where I feel like I'm kind of in between Greg, who's the owner operator, which I was for many years. And now I'm trying to give that trust over to employees. And I know we have some people coming up who have been trusting their employees longer and have their systems in place that they're confident in. And I'm kind of in that spot where I'm still figuring out my systems. So I want to see my employees prove that they can do this, they can be left alone, and I can trust them to do this. Otherwise, I'm shutting down. But luckily, I'm not shutting down, and I trust my employees, and they're awesome. So shout out to my employees.
Yo, you got me so hyped. I love it.
Yeah, nice.
You got to be one of the coolest bosses to work for, bro. For real. It's all about that culture, I'm telling you.
It is. And like, yeah, I am pretty chill and laid back. And ultimately, we want people to come in, have a positive experience, and feel better than when they left. Everything else we can work out. But I'm still East Coast, Jonathan. I cuss a lot. So in working with females, they don't love that. So I keep being told I need to say less F-bombs. So I'm working on that.
Oh, they're making you better, brother, for real.
That's right. That's right.
So Kaylin direct messaged me. See, she has a solution. And Kaylin, if you want to just jump on real quick and let us know your thoughts.
Sure. So I have Oasis tanks, and they don't have automatic controls on them. And I was really like, unless I put my tank on Christmas tree lights, which was crazy stupid, I couldn't manage them when I was off property. So I found this company called Wyze, W-Y-Z-E, and they're amazing. They've got these outdoor plugs, and you can plug 2 plugs into them and then plug that plug into an outlet, and it goes Bluetooth. So you can control your tanks from your phone. You can turn them on or off. You can also set them up automatically. Like my tanks go on automatically for 20 minutes twice a day, whether I'm there or not. And I didn't trust it at first because that's how I am. And so I can check it on my phone to make sure they went on and that they went off at the right times. And it completely freed my life. Just wanted to if you don't have that super automatic stuff on your tank, it's a great solution. WYZE. And they have all kinds of automatic stuff.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Caitlin. And
sure, I hope it's helpful.
Absolutely. And I think that I'm sure that a lot of you folks on this call right now utilize some automation. I'm sure maybe James for sure, Kim, I'm sure does too. And just utilizing not traditional automation technology in your float center that wasn't intended necessarily for a float tank, but it's not intended for anything other than what you want to use it for. And that's what's so great about this industry, is that we're pulling all this knowledge together to be able to build something that's even greater. Our next presenter is James Harder. James opened his first float center in 2006. 5 years prior, he had his first float experience, which truly blew his mind. James and his wife, Amy, have had immense success over the years, and James is the owner of Float Harder, Ripple Float Center and Wellness, New England Float Partners, and a member of both the boards of the FTA and the Float Conference, and I have no idea how you do it, my friend. Your turn is up. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, buddy. So it was actually 2016 that we opened our float center. We did our first float in 2010-ish. And the way that we pull it off is, I've got an excellent teammate, my wife, Amy, and we've got a great staff as well. So definitely couldn't do it without all of those pieces. So yeah, we have a 4 float tank center here in Portland, Maine. Float Harder opened in 2016. At our shop, we have 2 shop managers and 4 other staff currently. So yeah, just a great team, and it's taken a while to build that team up. We've had a couple of good team members come and go, and our staff right now is just such a solid crew. So Amy and I have been to 3 in-person conferences in last year, the virtual conference, and we've done a bunch of other short little trips. Most of them around floating in some way or another. I am jealous of Greg having gone out in 2016 when he first opened. Greg opened Float Madison just about the same time. I'd say within a couple of weeks as we opened Float Harder, and we didn't have the courage to shut down and head out there for 2016's FloatCon, but that's all right. We were there in 2017, 18, 19, and yeah, we're going to be out there again in a few weeks, and really excited about it. Whenever we're leaving, the one big thing is to check your staffing plan. Whoever's supposed to be working at the shop, make sure that they are aware of the shifts that they're going to be covering. Check with each of them individually and make sure every one of those shifts is covered. You don't want somebody to be rolling up to the shop for their 8 a.m. Saturday float, and the person who's supposed to be opening on Saturday forgot and they're not there. So check with everybody for that. And if you're short staffed, just block some floats. You can block stuff to make it to where it's easier for 1 or 2 people to run the day on their own. We've had to do that a lot over the years. We like to go see a lot of live music, and a lot of our staff love the same live music. So sometimes you just gotta cancel a few floats so everybody can go to the same show. It's worth it in the long run. Doing a solid inspection of your equipment, before you take off for any length of time, just go through and really look at everything closely and make sure that you're not going to have any surprises. When we went to our first float conference in 2017, I had a very small leak coming from one of the float tanks, and I knew it was there, and I had put a little cup under to collect all the drips. It was a very slow drip. And it was on the last day of the float conference, and it was just about to be the live podcast of Duncan Trussell, which was the thing I was looking forward to so much. And it was like out of a movie. It couldn't have been more perfect, as Duncan has the whole theater saying "Om, Om." I feel a vibration in my pocket, and I look down, and it says, "We've got a leak coming from tank 1." And it was so perfectly horrible, but I had a little laugh about it, and I said, nah, I'll get back to this in a couple hours. I had a feeling I knew what it was, and it wasn't that bad. But if I would have fixed that before leaving, it wouldn't have been an issue at all. So definitely, make a really good inspection of your equipment and fix anything at all, because that slow leak may turn to a much bigger leak in no time whatsoever. We actually had a very similar issue as that one on another tank, and I thought it was going to be a slow leak, so I had the part, and I was like, I'll fix it tomorrow, or and tomorrow turned into next week and whatever, and instead of this one progressing slowly, it completely let go all at once. And so yeah, you never know when that small leak's going to turn into a big one, so just take care of it. Make sure your tank chemistry is dialed in before you go on vacation or cut out for a little bit. You don't want things to be even a little bit off, because you want to set your team up for success. So make sure it's dialed in perfectly, everything looks good, instead of them trying to make something happen while you're away. Supplies, you want to make sure that your supplies are all stocked up. Make sure you're not leaving anybody set to be running out to the stores while you're gone. Make sure your staff is familiar with the equipment, so that if something does go wrong, you don't get a call and they say, hey, there's a tiny leak coming from the hose thingy. Like, if you're gonna have to troubleshoot something from afar, make sure they have the right terminology. It's going to make your life a lot easier. And that could go as far as labeling things inside your filtration system, whether you do that with a label maker or just take some painter's tape and wrap it around everything and write on it what it is with a Sharpie. It's going to make things a lot easier if you do have to troubleshoot from afar. And discuss what a tiny leak is and what it isn't, because there'll be a little drip coming out of something, and if it's tiny, then maybe you don't have to worry about it, but make sure that you both have the same idea of what a tiny leak is. Like Drew said, review emergency procedures. So for us, we want to make sure that's medical and life emergency, as well as equipment malfunction. Make sure we had our staff CPR certified a couple years ago, and we've got to do it again real soon. But shortly after, we had a medical emergency, and it was really great that we had recently had that training, and it was still a high stress situation to deal with. So yeah, make sure that people are aware of what that looks like. And then as far as an emergency situation with equipment malfunction, make sure people know how and when they should shut down equipment. Make sure they know where a pump kill switch is, or where the power switch is, or is it safe to just pull the power cable out of the wall? Make sure people know that kind of thing. Make sure you have a sump pump and a hose around in case you have to drain a tank in an emergency. Make sure your team knows where the water main in your space is. If one time we had a hose bib that we used to fill the tanks, it got stuck open and we couldn't shut it. It just broke the piece inside the hose bib, so we had to just run the hose down the shower drain until the plumber got there, and that would have been a lot of wasted water if we didn't know where the water main was to turn it off. Basically, just imagine the worst case scenario. So I guess this comes back to what Drew said about us living up here in the Northeast. But yeah, think of what the worst case scenario is, and then figure out how to train your team and how to deal with those. We'll keep a list of trusted contractors, a plumber, an electrician, those kinds of people, in case something does go wrong. Our staff knows who to contact for those emergency situations. If you rent your space, then having the contact information for your landlord or a property management team. And like Greg said, have a contact for a trusted friend who lives nearby, somebody who, maybe if they're not even involved with your float center, but somebody you can count on in a pinch to come in and with a clear level head and help take care of a situation. And then kind of a chain of command. Lay out for them when they should call a manager, when they should call you. Just have a call me immediately if this situation, otherwise call the manager, and that way you can relax and enjoy your time away, whether that's at the beach or at float conference, which definitely, if you're you're not already planning to go to Float Conference, you're crazy. It's going to be great. Whirlyball on Sunday. Come on. It's going to be awesome. I think that's about all I have. So
Fantastic. Wonderful. Always good to hear from you, James. Thank you so much for sharing. Kim Hannan. Kim has more than 18 years of training and marketing experience and is passionate about helping others and business owners create a ripple effect around the world. There was a time where actually I was on one of these and I said Kim was famous, and that's because I see Kim on a lot of educational material when I was first, I think it was when I was first researching float centers, and she's been so helpful and very excited to hear from her. Kim is the owner of Sakino Float Center and Salt Cave, Mindful Solutions, and is the president of the board of directors for the Float Conference. And she's also a host on the Art of Float podcast. So welcome, Kim.
Thank you. So you guys all covered all of the logistical stuff about, how to actually shut down your center. I think pretty much everything on my list somebody said, so I'm not going to repeat all of that. But I want to talk a little bit about the importance of taking a break, the importance of getting away. And that's so incredibly hard, especially for me too. Like Jonathan just said, I do a lot of things. I'm involved in a lot of projects, and that means I'm walking away from each of those for a week to 10 days, depending on what it is and where it is. But every time I do, I inevitably get to this place where I'm feeling super stressed about stepping away, and I get myself worked up into this state. And then as soon as I get there, all of that other stuff just fades away. And all of a sudden, my energy levels just change as I'm around, the people at Float Conference, or if I'm on vacation and I turn off my phone. No matter where it is, the ability to be really, really present wherever you are is what's going to refill your spirit. And as small business owners, we are constantly on. We don't work 9 to 5s. We don't get days off like normal people do, who are working in the corporate world. I did that for 15 years, and I can tell you that it was soul-sucking, draining work. And I work even more now, but I'm more intentional about it. And I'm also much more appreciative of those moments whenever I do shut down the business and take a break. It is by far the most valuable thing you could ever do. Most of the time when we get to that place where we're telling ourselves we can't afford to, or we can't do it for X, Y, and Z reasons, that's when we really need it the most. Float Conference, of course, I'm biased. I know a lot of what's been planned behind the scenes, and this year is going to be absolutely amazing. We have so many awesome speakers. We actually ended up having to tell people, like, we can't take you. We have too much stuff. We had to cut a couple of talks, including some of my own, but it's because we have so much really great stuff to be able to share. And whenever you get to that point in your business where you might be ready to hire employees, you're going to be so grateful for the information that you've received, in years past coming to events like this. If you're having a rough day, or you have a terrible guest who comes into the center, you're going to be grateful for that moment that you took when you were sitting on the beach somewhere and taking a break from it all. And, that ability to step away and practice what we preach is just so important. So incredibly important. And we're at a place right now where we have had some back of house employees. I'm actually getting ready to send an offer out to someone that we hope will also be able to help on front of house. I have my center closed for about 8-9 days or so currently. And we don't know how it's going to go with this new employee yet. So I'm just planning on doing everything that you guys have already said and keeping the center shut down. We don't do big announcements, kind of like what Greg was saying, but we don't do big announcements telling people that we're going to be closed. We'll respond to individual messages if necessary. But what I found doing those big announcements, you'll get more negativity from that than you will if you just close. And then people are like, hey, I didn't see anything open today. You're like, oh yeah, that's because we're at the Float Conference and we're learning new things about floating. And your guests are going to appreciate the value of you taking time off to be fresh for them, or by you taking time to go to the conference, learn the greatest and the latest that's happening, and all of the ways to continue to take good care of them so that your business can stay in business. Whenever we operate from that place of fear, sometimes that comes through to people. And it also comes through whenever we're not feeling our best and when we're not really motivated and inspired. And even just something as simple as being around this group, I think that's one of my secrets to success, is that I am involved in so many projects across the industry that I feel like I get little mini float conferences several times a week because I'm seeing you guys, I'm having conversations with you, we're texting, we're hopping on calls together. And that is what like really picks me up and helps me to continue just doing all the things that I do. There's amazing conference sessions that are scheduled for this year. But if you can't make it to FloatCon, like schedule a break, give yourself time away. People will understand. You might have a negative Nancy here and there, but you'll deal with those as a one-off. I think this is just such a big, big thing for us to be able to really take care of ourselves the same way we're encouraging our clients to take care of themselves.
Oh, can I add something too? Something
Yeah.
that Kim said. So I have one of my business coaches, when I was thinking about going to a retreat, he said to me, and it's something that's always stuck out in my mind, and I always think about this every time I'm going to go do something for myself. He said, so how much money are you going to spend total on like lost revenue plus whatever whatever you're going to be spending on your conference, whatever it's going to be? And he said, do you think that if you learn a new skill or you clear your head because you've had time to recharge or whatever, do you think that you could make that money back in a month, in 3 months? And the answer is always like, absolutely. I have come back, because I didn't really talk about going to conference, but I have come back from every single conference and either like incorporated a new service, made like a great connection for like contracting or whatever it is. And then I've always seen like, once I come back from conference, a couple months later, my revenue climbs even higher because I learned something or I made a connection. So it's like, if you can take just the emotion out of it and just say, if I'm going to spend this much money, how much money do I need to make in return to make that a justifiable expense? And it always works out great.
Got it. Love that.
Without a doubt. I think that's extremely wise, especially when it comes to being inspired. I didn't have my float center open when I first attended my conference back in 2015. But I'll tell you that after coming back, I was 10, 20, probably even 100 times more inspired and enthusiastic and just feeling like this is where it's at. And I felt like if I didn't have that value that I got from attending the conference, but I can also say just from getting away, the feeling of being refreshed and renewed, it's all very important. And I think that for anybody who is on the fence about coming to the conference or is considering it, I know that there are some options out there that they have. And Kim, I wanted to kind of just ask you and Jocelyn and anybody else, Nicole, and even James, if you guys have any thoughts about the conference, anything you'd like to mention, we'd love to hear from you guys.
Yeah. So first thing, if you don't have a ticket yet, you did technically miss early bird pricing, but if you want to come, I know some folks who can help you to get that early bird price. It's her, it's Jocelyn. You can message Jocelyn or just send an email to info@floatconference.com. We really want to see people there this year. Obviously, not just like from the organizational stance of, what we need, but also because this has been one hell of a year, 18 months of just craziness. And it has been such a roller coaster for everybody. We were really intentional this year about picking sessions and speakers that are going to help people in this moment of exactly where we are as businesses. Everything from marketing to self-care and avoiding burnout to employee retention and training, how to get it all done with ADHD. We've got some great research speakers. Like, there's so much stuff this year that like we really just pulled all of the things we were seeing people discuss in the Float Collective and saying like, okay, we want somebody to help us with this issue. We want somebody to help us with this issue. And so this year was a really specially curated, set of speakers, and we've got workshops. It's a whole different format this year, and we actually have so much content that like we didn't even know what to do with it all. So it's going to be an amazing event. And if you haven't decided yet, or if you're waiting for something to come through, please, send Jocelyn a message. Happy to help get people there. We want to see everybody there and to get that like amazing FloatCon buzz that we all get, and then go home and crash for a day.
To piggyback off of what Kim's saying too, is that like it was a really hard year for everybody. Like even if you don't realize how much we put in to keep our businesses afloat, with no pun intended. But also too, it's like I feel like every time I go to Float conference, there is literally nobody else in the entire world that you can talk to that understands like the unique things about Float. Like, oh my God, let me tell you about this one time I overflowed my tank, or let me tell you about this one crazy client I had. It's like we are not such a large industry that we can just, go talk to our, person, the next town away. There a lot of times there's people that like don't have anybody within hours of them, and it's so refreshing to share some of like the stresses and the struggles, but also too some of like the really funny moments that people that don't run or work in float center owners just like don't get. Like you can't talk to your regular friends about this stuff because they give you like a blank stare. But when you talk to all your float friends, they're like, oh my God, yeah, let me tell you about this time. And that is so refreshing. And that alone is just reason enough to come.
And Kaylin wanted to share just a real quick short story about how the Float conference inspired her. Kaylin,
Yeah, I think it was in Denver. I can't remember if it was Portland or Denver. I realized this is going to be my 6th conference, I think. Anyway, there was I think it was Denver. We had a gentleman there who was a psychologist for the Air Force. And I can't remember his last name, McMillan or Mc something. Anyway, he gave this whole talk about how, floating is good for, search and rescue teams specifically. Well, there's 4 centers in Tucson. I'm one of them. And because of that talk, I was able to pitch the Air Force and get the search and rescue team to float at my center. This was huge for me. These were contracts. And then during COVID, everything fell apart, but it's coming back now. And I just got a call from them yesterday. They want to come back and do another set. So, that was a bonus I didn't expect to get, and it was a weird, fun talk. But I think as far as value goes, that was huge. That was thousands of dollars, and many, like 20, 30 guys who started to float who had never floated before.
Yeah, totally. Like everyone said, I don't think there's been a single conference that I've come back from and not had some sort of endeavor that opened up for me. It's just great. Even just the content that you get to share with your staff and your community of what you've learned. Bringing back the newest research and using that to reach out to local hospitals or athletic treatment centers or whatever the case may be. And I know there's going to be some really cool research put out this year as well. And also, from the FTA side of things, we're gonna be there with a booth this year as usual, and would love to have you guys stop by and check things out there, and consider getting more involved with the FTA. We've really had a lot of fun starting some other projects up, and we're gonna be excited to share some of that information with you guys there as well.
And if I'm not mistaken, obviously, if you get a chance to, you can vote for the new members of the board of directors, the nominees. But you can also vote at the booth too, which is kind of like a special thing in my opinion. If you just wait and go, that'd be kind of cool to be able to participate in that.
One big benefit that we often get to that we don't think about is, it's kind of what Nicole was saying about people who get you, but the friends Like, I've made so many friends in the float industry, and never in a million years would I have expected to go to a conference and come back like meeting people that I actually talk to in my daily lives, that, you know, we check in, we have just such a great relationship and a warmth. And as an adult, sometimes it's really hard to make friends. So it's so nice to be able to go to a place where, you know, you might see some faces that you saw, you know, in little profile pictures, and suddenly you realize they're real humans, and make those connections. But just to have some friendship and some support, like as business owners, you need the professional network, but you need a personal network too. And, you know, I can't think of any better group of people to become friends with than the folks that are in this industry.
And if I may jump in to piggyback on that, because I have heard a little bit from some float centers that maybe they've been, or float center owners, they've been to the float conference before. And listen, we're adults. You don't just like dive in and make brand new friends. It's not that easy necessarily, especially if you're an introvert, and it's not necessarily about the industry. There's a lot of introverts, and I'm kind of like half and half, but if I had to pick one, I'd say I'm more introverted. It's awkward to be the new person in a situation, but put yourself out there. Stay positive about it. That you have to start somewhere, right? And when I first started in the industry, even James didn't email me back the first time I emailed him. No offense, James, but he's like one of my best friends now. I talk to him all the time, and like, you got to start places, right? So the first float conference for me, I was in a lot of awkward situations because I didn't know people, and there were people who had known each other from the years before, and I was the new guy. And I just want to kind of throw it out there to people who might be listening that, yeah, it's part of the deal when you're new. There's some awkward situations, and it's all good. And you got to start somewhere, and you're not just going to have these relationships that are super deep right off the bat. You got to work at that. So stay open-minded and be open to the fact that you have to start somewhere when building relationships. And the float conference is a great way to get in front of people, to meet people, and ask for a phone number. Having friends in the industry is hands down one of the best things about our industry, whether it's to ask questions that you might feel embarrassed to ask other people or put out to the public, or there's a salt shortage. I met James an hour away from my house recently, hooked me up with some salt. Like, I can't explain enough how having relationships in the industry are not only good for business, but personally, like, to meet new friends. How do you meet friends when you're an adult? It's usually with common interests, and floating is a common interest. And, you know, 3 years ago, I had no friends in the industry. Now I have a list of people I can text if I have a problem. You got to start somewhere. So I encourage people, start putting yourself out there. It's all good. It's a friendly industry. Trust me, even if you're very, very introverted, very, very friendly industry. So I'm encouraging you to put yourself out there and have an awesome time.
Just on that, Drew, I'm so sorry I didn't. But also, you know, also,
back on what Drew was talking about for a moment.
Yeah.
So we are starting a new system at the float conference this year. We're going to be pairing people up in a buddy system, and I'm also an introvert, so I'm really excited about having some sort of structure and organization to get people talking and making those connections. I don't know, Kim, maybe you could say a little more on the buddy system, or maybe nothing more needs to be said, but
Also, in addition to that, like what Drew was saying, if you're gonna have to put yourself out there and be vulnerable, there's not a better group of people to feel comfortable being vulnerable about. I mean, if you just think about what we all do, you know, you're going to be around great people that, you know, if you slip up and you say something foolish, you don't need to beat yourself up about it. You can just move on. And also, you know, with this group, it's a group that you you don't have to speak as quickly as Drew does. You can speak slowly. A lot of us are much slower people, so you don't have to have the words come right to you so quick. But yeah, just feel comfortable to show up and be who you are, and you're going to be the right kind of weird for somebody there, I guarantee it. But yeah, Jocelyn, what
I
about
think
that
that's our new slogan.
The right kind of weird for somebody.
The
I was
10th
just
Annual
gonna-
conference.
Yes, I love it.
I
Your
can try
mic-
to elaborate on the buddy system for that's pretty much it though. Like when you register for the conference, there's a question that asks if you want to participate in the buddy system and if you think you're an experienced buddy or if you're new to the conference and you want some help or if you're not quite sure. And like literally all we're doing is pairing everybody up with somebody that either has, you know, more experience or less experience and sending you guys an email and you just figure it out. Like just one built-in friend to get you started. That's literally all I'm doing. But I really hope that that's like enough. Like maybe someone's never been to the conference and they just want to ask a couple questions and they're not sure who to ask or they're embarrassed or whatever it may be. Or maybe you've been to the conference 8 times and you want to meet somebody new that you maybe wouldn't have had a chance to meet. And there you go, built-in buddy. Maybe you can make some connections. Maybe buddies can pair up with other buddies. I don't know. You guys got to figure it out. This is all we have time to do. So
Jocelyn, I'm ready for my
That's
little
it.
buddies. Send that email. I want to
are you
meet
even
my
signed
little
up
buddy.
for a big buddy?
I hope so. Wait,
I'm
You
gonna
have to be
apologize in advance for anyone that is buddied up with either James or myself.
You have to sign up for a buddy. So this is something that
I'll sign you up, James, but not Amy, right? You want to be a buddy, Amy?
Yeah, I thought I was a buddy.
Is everybody a buddy?
We're all buddies, I thought.
We're all buddies.
so is this something that is that's that we put in by request, or is this something that is just inherently being started?
A lot of past discussion about people, you know, feeling uncomfortable being new and not knowing how to kind of get in and talk to people if you haven't been there. I was very much the same way. My very first float conference, I felt really overwhelmed and like I don't know anybody. I'm thankful that I had attended Rise before because I at least had a couple of people I knew and I latched onto them at FloatCon, the first FloatCon that I attended in Portland, latched onto those folks. And then they started introducing me to other people. And then eventually, you know, that network kind of expanded. So as people, you know, as we were hearing this, the idea has been tossed around a couple of years. And this year we finally decided it's important. We need to make this happen. And we don't want to overcomplicate it. There's no special requirements, but we want to give everybody that opportunity to be connected with somebody else, to have at least one connection that they know they're going to find a time to meet up for coffee or a drink or something. And then hopefully the big buddies will be doing that and introducing their little buddies to other people and helping them just feel a little bit more at ease. So even if you're not signed up already, then you can still jump in. We are working on all of those assignments. And I say we, like these guys are working on those things. Nicole is kind of taking the point on that. And getting everybody paired up. So if you're interested in that, definitely, you know, shoot us a message soon so we can get you included. But, you know, that's also something that if somebody shows up to the conference and says, I would love to have a buddy, like we'll do our best to help find somebody. They might just be a random person walking by, but we're going to pair you up. It might be James. James might be everybody's buddy. So
I'll just go out on a whim here and say that I'll definitely participate in that. That sounds like a really great program.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I also wanted to just say one thing. Drew, like you totally made a connection with me because the same thing happened. I probably don't even need to mention it, but like Greg seriously saved me. So that's the reason why it's so important to have buddies in the industry, because even if I have to drive, you know, an hour and a half to Float Madison to pick up a UV sleeve tube, I'll have access to it. And I think that that's just kind of the cool nature of this industry. We're all kind of here to help each other. And, you know, being that it's in Milwaukee, if anybody does go to the Float conference, my Float Center is very close. And I'll personally have a workshop, Float Center marketing at Float conference. So I would love to hear and see everybody there too. So I'm very excited for that. I'm just going to say thank you to all of our panelists today. Thank you for everybody who attended this this panel discussion. Also, as James pointed out, the Float Tank Association is kind of like a community. We're all here to help build this kind of emerging association, and we're looking for folks to participate in our different committees, like the Education and Outreach Committee. We love to be able to feature folks on here to talk about their stories and their expertise in whatever it is that they do. And as we've also pointed out many times too, there is an election going on for the onboarding Flotation Tank Association Board of Directors. If you haven't seen that email, definitely search that out. But also, if you're attending the conference, head over to the booth. We'd love to see you. We'd love to see everybody. And again, Float Conference, August 25th through the 29th. Float Conference, August 25th through the 29th. I'm super excited, and I don't even know what a Whirlyball party is, but I'm definitely doing it because it sounds amazing. So I'm going to see all y'all at the Whirlyball party for sure.
Get your tickets for Whirlyball.
Get your tickets for Whirlyball. You won't regret it. It's going to be a blast.
Can you explain it a little bit?
And Roosters for what?
Yeah, we can explain it. Do you want to explain it, James, or you want me to?
Go for it, Jocelyn.
Cool. So Whirlyball is a connection, like sort of a Frankenstein of sports. So you're on a like bumper car and you have like a wiffle ball racket thingy. What is that called? It's like a scoop.
Can I take over? You're
okay.
So yeah,
I'm not as excited as the Red Roosters.
Whirlyball is a magical game where it's a 5-on-5, and you are sitting in a bumper car, one of the ones with the little handle that you turn to change reverse and forward and steer. So it doesn't really control as well as you'd hope it would. And you're on a bumper car course, and at the end of each end of the court, there is a backboard, kind of like a basketball backboard, except instead of the ring coming out, it's built into the backboard. And you have a wicket in your hand, like what's at the end of a lacrosse stick. And there's a wiffle ball that you throw from your teammate to your teammate, and then you try to throw it at the net at the back of the backboard in order to score points.
All while people are bumping into you.
Yes, while your competition is trying to knock you around, knock the wiffle ball loose, and pick it up and pass to their team. And it is wild. And
it sounds like a magical game. I love how you play.
It's very silly, and there will be bruises.
There will be bruises, and you are also, it's a great spectator sport as well. If you don't want to get in,
it's very amusing to watch.
You will laugh.
Yeah. So you should definitely play.
That's Sunday at 6 p.m.
Yes, after the conference wraps.
Awesome.
Yeah, we don't want any of the presenters to get too injured ahead of their presentation. But don't be scared. Don't be scared. We'll all be home in our float tanks days later, and we'll be able to recover fine. It's no problem.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds like a fantastic, magical weekend, and I'm very excited. Thank you all very much. I think that we are going to conclude. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your evening, friends, and thank you for joining us today. Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.